Hi, I'm Kelly, and you're listening to Scandal Water.
Where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
And Ashley
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, Ashley.
Good morning, Candy.
We are back today to take another little romp through a decade.
Yeah, we
this
are.
one being the 90s.
Woo!
I've had so much fun with these.
Have you?
Yeah.
It has been fun. It's been fun to listen to.
All right. Well, here's our last one for May. As we have done with all the previous episodes, let's start with a little phraseology.
Okay.
Do you remember any phrases that you used back in the 90s?
You would say as if all the time because of
100%.
Clueless.
Yes.
Yes, as if. And I don't know. I still would have had holdovers from the 80s like dude and cool and awesome
Right.
and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
what else do we have?
Well, I looked up a few of them, and here's what they said. Talk to the hand.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, snap. My bad.
Yeah, my bad. I say that. I do say my bad.
Alrighty then.
And that's from Jim Carrey. Alrighty then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whatever. Which is still one of the most annoying phrases. When somebody says whatever to
Yeah.
you, that is so dismissive.
It is.
Yeah. But I think that one's still around.
Or is it this? Do they do that? Whatever. That's also from Clueless.
She put her hands together to
did.
form the W.
I did.
I found an article on Watch Mojo called Top 10 Things 90s Kids Used to Do. Now, you were a kid
I
through
was.
the 90s. Well, you went from 10 to 20,
I
right?
did, yes.
So part of that time, you were a fairly young kid.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I would read this list to you, and
See what I did?
We'll just do a little
Sure,
check to see
let's
if
do
you
it.
relate to any of these. Now, full disclosure, there were two that I'm giving a shout out to this article, but there were two that we thought were maybe a little off. It seemed like it was possibly crossing over into a different decade. So
Oh.
I will tell you that we did modify two of these.
You
Full
said we. I had nothing to do with this.
Kirk.
Oh, okay.
Kirk's like, I was reading the list to him, and he was like, I don't think so on that one. And
Okay.
so we ended up modifying two.
Okay.
Kirk and I.
Trying to give credit where it's due. I had
That's right.
nothing to do with this
That's
list.
right. So number 10, did you ever watch TGIF?
Of course I did.
Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
That was like Full House and My Two Dads was on there maybe. It was just like, you watched,
Yeah.
it was on ABC, you watched TGIF.
So there was a little blurb about this, and I thought I would share it because I thought it was interesting. It said, for grown-ups, TGIF has always been Thank God It's Friday, but for kids,
Thank goodness it's funny.
yes, that's exactly right. It said kids in the 90s. That's how they know it.
Uh-huh.
And it said that the 8 to 10 p.m. lineup would have included some of the following, depending on where in the decade you were. You've already named Full House, also Perfect Strangers.
Oh, yeah.
Family Matters, Boy Meets World.
Yep.
Yeah, several like that. Family-friendly things that people watched every week. Number 9, did you ever own a Walkman or Discman?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, definitely.
Number 8, you were probably too old for this one, but did you know anybody who had a Tickle Me Elmo?
Did I? I remember the craze of it where people,
yeah.
that's when they started doing like the must-have Christmas gift, or not
Yes.
started doing, but that
Yeah.
was the must-have Christmas gift.
That year. Yeah,
A little creepy to me,
craziness.
like, it's like those little things, the Furbies that would talk to you.
Yeah, Furbies.
Do you remember those? And they
Yes.
would like come to life in
Like
your room. I
little
never had
gremlins or
No, I
something.
never had a Furby. No, no Furbies in my bedroom.
This one I did not remember at all, and apparently it was very short-lived. So I'm not sure how it made the list, but I'll ask you anyway. Did you ever drink Orbit's soda?
No.
Yeah.
That sounds gross.
I'm not sure how it made the
I
list.
know
It
Orbit's
said-
gum.
It said it hit the shelves in 1997 and was discontinued by 98.
Oh, well, short-lived.
Okay.
It burned out like a comet.
Number 6, did you ever remember those seeing and trying to look at those magic eye pictures where you have to kind of squint your
Yes,
eyes?
I
and-
never could get them to work.
Oh, I can.
You can?
Yes, there's like a trick.
Oh, I don't have that
You
trick.
almost have to like kind of almost try to pretend like you're looking through it and let your eyes blur, and suddenly it just comes right at you.
Nope.
Yeah. Okay, number 5. Watch kids shows on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, I did.
I mean,
Ren and Stimpy,
yes.
Animaniacs. I loved Animaniacs.
Oh, Rugrats, Doug,
yep.
Hey Arnold, Rocket Power.
I didn't watch Hey Arnold or Rocket Power, but I watched the other ones.
Yeah.
Animaniacs probably being the top.
Yeah, Nickelodeon was huge.
Yes, it was.
Huge during this time period. Did you ever raise a Tamagotchi?
No, Tamaguchi or Tamagotchi?
I don't know. How do you say it?
I don't know. Clearly, I didn't raise one though. Didn't you have to feed them, and then if you didn't, they would die, and it's a little electronic pet thing?
Yes, it was exactly. It was a digital pet. It was actually released in Japan in 1996, and then it made its way to North America the following year. And they said the special thing about them was they went through several life cycles if you looked after them properly, and they were this standout toy sensation basically by the end of that decade.
Nice.
I never had one. I do remember them though.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, this one I can totally relate to. Waiting for the internet to connect.
Oh, yeah. Yes, you would dial up.
The dial-up,
Yes.
exactly. In fact, there was a quote that says, "The beeps and hisses of a dial-up modem connecting is one of the most iconic
Yes, it
sounds of
is.
the decade."
Along with, you've got mail.
Young people have no idea.
they have no
You
idea.
have no idea because the internet, you guys, did not come out for so long.
Like 96, right?
And then when it finally did, you did. You had to sit there and wait.
And you had to get little discs that gave you 5 free hours. You know how fast you could suck up 5 free hours, and then you're like, well, guess I can't do internet until for next month.
There were so many things that we went through. Floppy disks
Yep.
in the beginning.
Yep.
Okay. Number 2. Did you ever play with or collect Beanie Babies?
Oh, yes.
That was a huge craze.
One of my very first jobs was to sell Beanie Babies and
Really?
fast food toys, like my own self-employment, like 15, 16 years old. I sold fast food toys on eBay. And
eBay was new too.
yes, it was. And you would get like the McDonald's toys. If you had them mint in package, you could sell them. I remember ordering when 101 Dalmatians came out, the live action 101 Dalmatians, that you could order a big house of all the 101 Dalmatians.
Oh, really?
I did. And I got one of those for, I think it was $101 maybe. And you ordered it and it came in this big thing. And a couple years later, I sold it for like double the price.
Nice.
I probably could have sold it for a lot more now. But
Did you buy it with that in mind?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. It was a
Yep.
endeavor to make money. Okay. I remember my Aunt Janice was such a collector, and I wouldn't have predicted that because she was my aunt. She was older than than a lot of the collectors at that time. But that's the thing; it crossed all ages. I think it crossed all ages, all generations. They only cost about $5, but so many of them did become collector's items.
The Princess Di Beanie Baby.
Ooh, I mean,
that was big.
People would pay big money, and they would be on the hunt.
Yes, they
to
would.
go find them.
Along with Holiday Barbie.
Oh yeah, I have holiday Barbies in my house.
Do you?
I do.
That's so cute.
I was thinking it would be big money.
No.
No,
It went out.
Yep. Number 1, rented movies at Blockbuster.
Yes.
That is such a great thing for them to put down there.
Yeah.
And I was like, this should be number 1
Yeah.
because it was such a big thing that some of our young people today have never experienced.
They only have the red box. They
That's
would know
right.
it as red box.
Yeah.
But you had to go to the store and they had the televisions up in the room and they would play previews. You go, oh, I want to see that.
Yes. And you would literally stroll through aisles after aisles. It was almost like it was a video library is
Pretty
what
well.
it was.
Yep.
They would have them arranged by genre. And then this was the thing too. You had to get them back on time or
Yes,
pay
you
a big
did.
fine.
Yes,
and
you did.
You were supposed to be kind and
rewind.
rewind. I love that. Okay. That was a survey, of course, focused on kids in the 90s. So other lists that I ran across for the 90s had different things. For example, this list did not mention Friends, which is one Friends and must-see TV, 2 of the biggest things you would see all the time if you were just simply looking at what were big things in the 90s.
Right.
So this was a little bit of a focus list. But we are going to choose, as we have in the past with our other previous decades episodes, 3 things we're going to dig into a little bit more deeply. But first, I want to share with you the topics that we have already addressed naturally through our, how many years now? 2.5 years of doing Scandal Water.
Yep.
So if you would like a little bit more of the 90s, here's what you can do. You go back into our back catalog and find There's No Crying in Baseball, celebrating the
Yes.
1992 hit A League of Their Own, which came out just this past March. Love is in the Air with the classic Meg Ryan rom-com French Kiss, which came out in
Love it.
February 2024, just this past February. This Hero Wears Pearls, an interview with world record holder and author Tori Murden McClure. Now, that obviously is focused on her accomplishment, but it was during the 90s, so that would be an interesting one to take a look at, and that came out just a few months ago, too. This episode, should you choose to listen, will lead you to the 1996 blockbuster Mission Impossible. That was July of 2023. Quitters Never Win, the true story behind Rudy. August 23rd, 2022. Jurassic Park
Yes.
1993, Spielberg Finds a Way. That came out in June of 2022. And Selena the White Rose was May 31st, 2022. So there are a
Good
few other
stuff.
topics you can find if you want to go look those up. But let's go ahead and dig into the first 90s related topic that we're going to talk about a little bit.
Was it Austin Powers? The way you did your fingers
Oh.
made me think of Austin Powers.
No, actually it's not. But
Okay.
this one surprised me.
What?
This one surprised me. I'm going to tell you. There was a show also on Disney Plus called Rewind the 90s.
You know, I saw that. I want
Did
to watch it.
you?
Oh, I mean, I haven't
Oh,
seen it,
you
but
haven't-
I've seen
you-
it as far as put it in my, I want to watch
okay.
this.
Well, as research for this episode, I watched just, I think, 2 episodes. I want to go back and see the rest of them. But the first one actually led to this topic that I'm discussing right now, because their first episode in that show, Rewind the 90s, was dedicated to reality revolution.
Yeah.
The advent of reality TV,
Yeah.
which came out in this decade. This is when it happened.
Was it the real life?
Well, that's part of it, but
Okay.
they came back before then. So here you go. We're going to trace it all the way back. Thank you again to that show, Rewind the 90s. So they say the roots of it went back to a technological advancement that occurred around the start of the 1990s, which was when home video cameras became so much smaller, so much more streamlined, so much more affordable that suddenly everybody had one in their houses.
Yeah.
And they were using them to create little videos
Yep.
all the time. Do you
Yep.
remember when
I
you
do.
I got one. I remember that. An American producer had seen a Japanese television show, which gave him the idea that led to America's Funniest Home Videos.
Oh,
Now, that
yeah.
actually premiered in late 89, like the end of November around Thanksgiving, but it was during
The 90s.
the 90s that it became so popular, hugely popular, before the first season even ended. And the producers would literally receive thousands of videotapes a week.
Wow.
A week.
Wow.
Yeah. The show remained one of the top rated shows throughout most of the decade. Hugely popular. There's one element. Here's another. The show Cops also aired in 89, but it did not hit It did not hit prime time until 91, which is when it became mainstream and really popular. The originator of the show had actually had a really hard time trying to get anybody to pick up his idea. He'd been putting it out there for quite some
For
time.
Cops?
For Cops. Mhm.
Interesting.
Until the writers went on strike.
Oh, they needed content.
They needed content. And they were real thrilled about cheap content
Yep.
where you didn't have to go get actors to come in and
Yep.
do something.
Yep.
So they gave Cops a chance and it became a hit. So the episode goes on to share how not only Cops, but then a few other things we're about to talk about actually started to cause this, I guess you would call it, incident, where it seemed like the lines between news media and entertainment started to blur. So the two things that I'm talking about that led to that, one was the use of helicopter reporters to catch footage of action-packed crimes like car chases
Oh,
and
yeah.
bank robberies. The other one was court TV.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, think about this. You guys are going to remember. It was one of those helicopters that managed to locate and then live broadcast the very famous and very slow chase
OJ.
of OJ's white Bronco.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, think of the news coverage
Yep.
and how many
That whole
millions of people
trial.
watched that. And then the court TV,
Yeah.
it was broadcast on court TV, but actually before then, it was pointed out that court TV had been around for a while. Nobody was watching it until the 1993 trial of the Menendez brothers, who were convicted of murdering their parents.
Yeah.
And people tuned in. True crime. People were
Started taking
all
off.
over it. And then, of course, by the time of OJ's trial, I mean, everybody was watching it. Again, more reality, more true crime, more, all these things are coming out. Talk shows, also very popular in the 90s. And do you remember the one that became a huge hit?
Was it Sally Jesse?
Well,
Or Phil Donahue?
They were both popular, but they were more feature article news based.
Yeah.
The one that went more towards pretending to have a reality TV slant was the Jerry Springer show.
Was he in the 90s?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, another form of reality entertainment, which a lot of people have just referred to as trash TV.
Yep.
But it was hugely popular. In fact, it was sad, but it said the more violent, the more salacious the interactions would become on stage, the higher the ratings for the episode.
Wow.
Okay, so all of these things going on, and then as you've already said, The Real World aired in 1992. Now that was MTV's attempt to branch out of their music video format, because I heard one of the VJs comment, how long can you keep people entertained and engaged when all you're doing is playing the same music videos over and over again?
You gotta have different stuff.
They needed something new. They needed something economical. So they billed The Real World as a social experiment that was basically also a soap opera, and it became a massive hit. It was the longest program in MTV history, and it was thought by many to be the show that launched the reality TV genre in the US. And then I'll add one last little note about this idea. Then you had the Blair Witch movie, which was
I wouldn't know.
groundbreaking.
Haven't seen it. Not gonna see it. Nope, but I know you have.
I have. But it was groundbreaking.
Yes, it was.
Because it was really the first movie to use reality TV
Yes.
techniques
Right.
to create this incredibly scary
Found footage.
and successful film. Yes, the whole premise was this was supposed to be found footage. But what they talked about on this TV show that I was watching was how clever they were in generating the buzz and using the new internet and the capabilities on the internet to market it. For example, you would go to the Blair Witch website and they had the actors who were in it listed as either missing or dead.
Oh,
and they had all these backstories. So many people really actually thought it was true.
I probably would have if I'd seen it.
A lot of people did.
Yeah.
A lot of people did. And one of the actors was interviewed on this show, Rewind the 90s, this episode. And he said he had people calling him up. They thought he was dead. People believed it. It really crossed the lines.
Yeah.
Again, all of these things together, the 90s was the decade of launching reality TV and reality movies.
Reality movies. What an interesting concept.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I know what you mean. Found footage movies.
There you go. Thank you. That's a better way to say it. Well, before we move on to talk about the other two, why don't we take a quick break?
We've spent the bulk of May time traveling through the decades to look at some of the entertainment highlights of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But here's the real question. Which specific actors would we consider to be the face of those decades? Is the 70s king of cinema Marlon, Jack, or Bert? Is the queen of the 90s Meg, Julia, or Demi?
We discuss these questions and more in our May mini-sode, available exclusively to our Buy Me a Coffee members. If you'd like to tune in, you can visit our website, www.scandalwaterpodcast.com, to sign up and get access. Then tell us who we got wrong, or who we got very, very right.
Like our choice for king of the 80s.
As always, thank you for supporting Scandal Water Podcast. We lift our teacup to you.
Cheers!
And we are back. And I predict you are really going to enjoy the next one we're going to talk about.
Okay.
So, guess what else came out as being very popular in the 90s?
Well, gosh, that's a broad question. Do I get a clue?
Pixar.
Oh, Pixar.
Yes.
Toy Story.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. I remember going to see that, and we ended up, it was so packed that we had that front row in the movie theater where you crane your neck looking up at it. But I remember being wildly blown away.
Oh, I was.
With the innovation.
Yes, the innovation. And I think this is something that actually came out of my research. But personally, I remember thinking, wow, it's so beautiful to watch, but it's also such an incredibly good story. Like it had both elements of it.
It did.
Yeah. Well, I started researching and I found out so many things I did not know. Here we go. Pixar actually started as a company in 1986, and it started making little short films and commercials all through that time. But it was in 1991 when Disney and Pixar announced an agreement that they were going together to make and distribute at least one computer-generated animated movie sometime in the future. It took them 4 years.
That's crazy.
But they did exactly that. And you've already named the movie.
Toy Story.
It was Toy Story. Toy Story was the world's first computer animated feature film. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah. They had in Beauty and the Beast, the scene in the ballroom, that was the background was computer generated, which is when you saw that, that's when you were just like, absolute. I don't think I don't want to say like kids today, but kids today cannot fathom what it was like to see in 1991 this generated background. We never saw that kind of stuff.
Groundbreaking.
And then a few years later, you see this Toy Story, and it's just, you can't put into words what it was like to first see this kind of animation.
You know what would be fun would be somebody younger, if they wanted to get an idea, to go back and to watch one of the early Disney movies animated and compare it to some of the more current ones, just to really
see what
think
it
about
like.
the advancements, because that's the thing, right? Back when they were doing these early Disneys, everything is hand drawn. It is hand drawn. I mean, the difference between having to do every single stroke by hand versus
rendering,
right, what they are able to do with these computers, unbelievable. Well, moving back into this though, it was released, Toy Story, in theaters on November 22nd of 1995. It opened at number 1 that weekend, and it went on to become the highest grossing film of the year, making $192 million domestically and $362 million worldwide.
it was a phenomenon.
It absolutely was. Toy Story was recognized with Academy Award nominations for Best Original Song, Best Original Score, and Best Original Screenplay, which was the first time an animated film was recognized for screenwriting.
Wow.
Yeah. John Lasseter received a Special Achievement Oscar from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences for his, quote, inspired leadership of the Pixar Toy Story team, resulting in the first feature-length computer animated film. So this was applauded. It was not only incredibly well received, but everybody recognized the achievement. Yeah. A Time magazine article commented, quote, as the first full-length 3D computer animated movie, it was a milestone for animation, possibly the most significant since the introduction of color.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It just opened up an entire new world in
Yeah.
animation and storytelling.
Absolutely. Well, before the 90s were over, they had also released A Bug's Life in 1998 and Toy Story 2 in 1999, which I saw both of those. I mean, I couldn't wait for them to come out.
I did too.
Yeah. And of course, it was one achievement after another. From that point on, we're focused in on the 90s. But as John Lasseter, the animator who directed Toy Story, reflected...
He also did The Incredibles too, I believe. The Incredibles as well, not Incredibles 2.
He reflected in an interview, every story envisioned by the Pixar team requires something that they don't know how to do, so they invent the technology that was needed. That just amazed me to think about the fact that they just say, well, here's what we want to do and here's what we need. Let's make that happen. And they just figured it out. Whew. Okay, so that was Pixar and its use of CGI. For our final one, we're going to go in a completely different direction.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. If you were thinking about fashion in the 90s, what are some of the fashion statements or typical fashion outfits you would have seen?
Candy. You sit across from me almost every 2 weeks. Do I look as though fashion is something that's at the top of my radar?
You're so funny.
I'm serious.
You know
I'm in
fashion.
I'm in my athleisure right now. Fashion in the 90s was grunge, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Describe the grunge look.
Baggy pants, plaid shirts, like what Kurt Cobain wore, Nirvana, dark hair, dark makeup, just where the 80s would have been bright and colorful. This is more earth tones, and I don't want to say dirty. That's not right, but like just bigger. It didn't fit you as well.
Yeah.
It was oversized.
You actually did a really nice job with that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. In fact, you know, it's funny because like just thinking about the 90s, I would have come up with grunge. But what made it easier was when I thought about so many different times, especially if you're an educator and you work with kids, there will be like dress up like the Decades days or, you know, that type of thing. And whenever anybody has to come in like the 90s, they go straight to that attire. So that's what made it easier for me was to think about, well, what does everybody always wear to the Decades decades parties. But here's the thing. I started by asking you about fashion because it leads us to the music. You already said that, right? You connected it directly to Nirvana and Kurt Cobain. That's actually what I'm going to move over to right now.
Okay.
I saw an article that was on the American Songwriter website, and it says, quote, "The 1990s was a time of countless musical eras: rock, rap, grunge, alternative, bubblegum pop, boy bands, girl groups, and more.
That's true. Yeah.
It is enough to make one's musical mind spin."
It is.
And
It
I
is.
love that quote because I had started out thinking, okay, I'm just going to do grunge. And then I was like, oh, but wait, no, boy bands were so big.
Yeah.
Boy bands were so big. And then I was like, oh, but wait, wasn't Spice Girls during this time
Yep,
period?
they were.
And as I kept thinking, I was like, then you had like Britney Spears.
Britney.
This was the time of so many different musical genres that I just decided I just needed to talk about music in general.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to talk about briefly. But I did focus in a little bit more on grunge because I felt like that was maybe the biggest. So the grunge movement was actually fairly short-lived, I found out. But it was so significant and so popular that for many people, they just associate grunge music and grunge fashion as almost the face of the 90s. Like that's their association. And many do consider the group Nirvana with lead singer Kurt Cobain to be the most successful mainstream grunge band of the 90s. It was their second album, 1991's Nevermind, that just skyrocketed into popularity, and it had the featured song Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that everybody always thinks of. Moving from music to fashion, Kurt Cobain was married to Courtney Love at that time, and a lot of people give the two of them credit for being a huge influence on the grunge fashions of that time period. According to Harper's Bazaar, by definition, grunge is all about de-emphasizing the silhouette of the body and looking, quote, untidy, in an attempt to mirror the cool look of pop musicians in both punk and heavy metal rock bands. So some of the clothing choices that you would associate with grunge might be thrift store clothing, flannel, loose-fitting distressed jeans, cardigans, oversized t-shirts, hoodies and layers, droopy beanies, Vans, and Doc Martens.
Interesting.
I know. So just a tiny bit on grunge and grunge fashion, but as we've already said, it was a time period that just big on groups. Some of the boy bands, do you want to say them? Some of the big boy bands. of the time?
Backstreet Boys, 98 Degrees.
Yep. And NSYNC.
NSYNC.
Yes. I mean, they were huge. And then we did have some girl groups as well.
Spice Girls, you already
Spice Girls
said.
are the big ones that come to my mind. There were alternative rock bands or artists. Some of you may remember REM, Weezer. I mean, of course, Green Day's still going. Alanis Morissette. A lot of sources actually even characterize Nirvana as being alternative rock. Like they call them grunge, but they also say they were kind of an alternative rock band as well. Yeah. And then we also had rappers. Some of the big names that I saw in this category were the Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac Shakur.
Yeah.
I think the point I took away from my research was this was a time where you weren't tied to one genre. It was, you could be the Britney
It was a decade
Spears.
of like variety.
Yes, it was almost anything goes as long as it's good, as long as it's quality. So thinking about music of the 90s, since you were a very young person, were you a listener? I mean, what kind of music did you gravitate toward?
Well, honestly, you know that I tend toward the more, it would have been vintage to me, but more vintage nostalgic. I was in that time not really listening to contemporary music for my age group. I was listening to older stuff. So I didn't really, I mean, I know the stuff a little bit because of the roller skating rink. I think that was in the 80s and a little bit of the early 90s. But maybe Britney Spears, maybe I would just have heard them. I didn't listen to any of the alternative grunge stuff, but maybe the more bubblegum things I would have heard, or the rap stuff in school, I would have heard that. But I was an old soul, man. I didn't listen to it as much. What about you?
It's funny because I guess I hadn't thought about it, but I liked a lot of different types of music. I can remember, I still like to dance. I just never do it anymore.
Yeah.
But I used to like to dance a lot, and I can remember dancing to some of Nirvana's songs. I can remember REM and the Violent Femmes, if you guys have heard of the Violent Femmes. Green Day, yes. I love alternative music, or some of it, I guess I should say, not all. And then at the same time, I can picture Britney Spears in that video when she's dressed up like a schoolgirl.
Yep,
What was
yep.
it? Hit Me Baby One More Time.
Yep.
That was a huge hit. I mean, Britney was big.
She was
she
very
sang some
big.
great stuff. So I liked a lot of different types of music, and I can totally relate. The Spice Girls. I
Yeah.
enjoyed the Spice Girls. And
Yeah.
they were a huge sensation back at that time.
I guess that is where the roller skating rink is where I would have gotten most of my contemporary music. And can I say how much I wish I could still roller skate? Like, do you remember when I went to the little birthday party for my cousin's daughter and you warned me? You were like, you haven't roller skated in a really long time. You need to be prepared. Like, you do not have the body of a 12-year-old anymore.
I did not say it that way.
Well,
but
you
what
were
I said
very
is
kind.
your shins are going to hurt you.
Yes,
Like,
and I was like, Candy, silly Candy. I made it maybe half a rotation before I thought I was going to die. The shin splints that I immediately got, I was like, what has happened to me? I was so proficient at this. I was swirling about that ring at 12 years old, and at 42 at the time, I was just like, I'm gonna die. I'm going to die.
I have a friend my age who, for a time, this has been now like 7 or 8 years ago, that was her weight loss strategy.
I
And
love
that
it.
was her fitness strategy.
I would love to be able to do that.
She toned up and she dropped some weight because she
Tell
was going
her to
down
help
and
me figure
roller
out
skating.
how to do this again. Because how do you get your shins ready for that?
You gotta. It's like exercising your body. They have to get used to it.
My shins
you
said
stretch
no.
and
They
you just
said
keep
no.
doing it, and start slow and just build with
guess
longer
so.
increments. But yes, but I think your point. We go back to
Yes,
that.
yes.
That's when you do hear a lot of the
Yes.
music. You did hear it when you were doing that.
I did.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings us to our armchair.
Okay.
Armchair psychologist.
As we have with our other previous 2 episodes, let's just think about the 90s as a decade. What do you think stands out to you? Why are we nostalgic for it, or what do we celebrate about it?
Well, for us, it's not as far in the
past.
as
Yes.
if you had done the aughts from 2000 to 2010, we'd be like, what? That was like yesterday, right? It's hard for me to know that there are kids. It's hard for me to know that there are kids that were born in the year 2000 that are now 24 years old.
Oh,
this
my
year.
Goodness.
What in the world? What's
Yeah,
that
that's
about?
not
That's almost
right.
a quarter of a century.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And when I think of 10 years ago, I think of the 90s. Like, it was 10 years ago, right? I don't think of
Yes,
myself
I'm with you.
as being 40, almost 45. I'm like, no, in my mind, I'm like 35. And it was,
It was just yesterday.
It was just yesterday. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What do I think about though with the 90s? Okay, so let's go with our fabric. We said in the 70s it was like sequins, in the 80s it was neon. So we want to say the 90s are flannel. Would you say that's the fabric you think of?
Yes, I think that's a really good way.
The grungy fabric.
Yes. The kind of just down home, throw on the clothes and go kind of look.
Yeah.
Very comfortable. Very comfortable.
It was very comfortable. And I guess I still kind of gravitate toward that, even though I didn't dress in grunge. I don't dress in form-fitting clothing. Usually it's just, I don't feel comfortable in form-fitting clothing just for physical reasons, not like emotional. But it's really strange how things will influence you that you don't even realize are influencing you. But, it also was an era of thinking of the rom-coms. They had all the floral and pretty dresses and, that kind of stuff. So we had so much different things going on. I think what I'm learning is the further we get on in the decades, thinking of the aughts and the 2010s, and even now, there's not really a set thing, there's
10
more
years, right? Yeah.
but it's more variety. Where
Right,
you think
right.
of the 50s, you think of poodle skirts. You
Oh,
go,
I
poodle
see.
skirts.
Okay.
Or the 60s, the flower children. The 70s, you've got the jumpsuits and all that. And like the further we go on as far as fashion, what would you say
it's
is
not as defining.
No, it's not as
limited.
defining. If somebody had to wear something for the aughts, what would they wear? What would you wear for the 2010s decade?
Oh, no. That's
Right?
a really good point. That's
Right?
A really
You can't.
Good point.
I can't think of anything.
Right.
It's becoming more blended.
Yes.
The influences are becoming
People
more
are you're allowed to be an individual and just wear what you want, as opposed to this is how everybody's supposed to look and dress, and we're all going to look the same. Yeah. When I think about the 90s, I think what hits me was that it's the era of technology. When I think about the fact that you started the 90s with no internet, no cell phones.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where cable was, but it was probably very limited, but especially the internet, like that changed everything. And I remember getting my cell phone and how revolutionary that was. Do
you mind sharing how old you were when you got your cell phone?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
think I was 19. I think I was around 19.
I think I was 24.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a thing.
Uh-huh.
It was a huge
Uh-huh.
thing. And I remember my friend who was a little better off than I was had a car phone.
Ooh.
I mean, this was the decade where you would see Saved by the Bell. They'd be walking around carrying the phone that was like all the way down the side of his face because it was so huge. Like, you went from what an advancement it was to have a phone that you could take outside of your house at all,
Right.
to, wow, somebody's got one in a car, to all of a sudden you had your own. And I remember at first I was thinking like, okay, this is like an only emergency type
Right.
thing.
Yes.
This is something that you just have here in case you would ever need it.
Yep.
And then all of a
don't
sudden,
even talk about texting and trying to get that. You hit that number 4 times to get the W or whatever it was. I remember talking just at rehearsal the other day. Our friend Hayden and I were talking about the advancement in technology and how this would be more of the 80s. I remember living in Louisville, so it would have been the 80s for me. But we had a car that talked to you when you opened the door, and the car would say, "The door is ajar," and you were like, whoa, this car is talking to me. And now how everything talks to you.
Right.
We have automated everything, and it's not a big deal anymore. But to see me in the 1980s, this door opens and the car talks, and you're like, my mind is blown, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember I was a really young teacher. I think I just started my career, and I heard this woman, she was teaching a class. It was my continuing education, and she was like, there's this thing coming called the internet.
Yes. Yes. There's a
I
famous...
couldn't even register what it was.
Yeah, there's a famous clip. Do you remember when Katie Couric and Bryant Gumbel were on the Today Show, and they're like, what's the internet? And they're like, can somebody tell us what this internet thing is?
Yes.
I mean,
think about it.
Yep.
No concept
Nope.
of what somebody would try to explain it to you, and you'd be like, what? Like, what? How can something like that even exist? You had no idea.
sorcery.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's like car phones.
So to me, the 90s, yes, I think fashion-wise it had its own flavor, music-wise, but to me it is the era of technology.
I think I'd agree with that.
100%. Yeah.
Which then led to all the blending of stuff.
There you go.
Probably.
Yeah, absolutely. So far, our cheers. If we're both agreeing that we feel like this is the era of technology, why don't we go back to Pixar and think about
sure.
some of these people from companies like Pixar, like Apple,
Yeah.
like Disney,
Yeah.
who were innovating and changing the world. Let's give a big shout out to our innovators and
Creators.
of the 90s.
Let's do it. Cheers.
If you love what we do, please rate and review our show. Or you can become a supporter by making a donation through buymeacoffee.com/scandalwaterpod. Whether a single gift or a recurring monthly donation, it would go a long way towards supporting our work and allowing us to keep the tea brewing.
At our website, www.scandalwaterpodcast.com, you can submit questions or your own story ideas, access our sources and show notes, see the merch we offer for sale, and more. You can join the Scandal Water community through our Scandal Water Podcast Facebook page or follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Scandal Water Podcast.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music. Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.